So let's get started. Let's talk about true, false, and not given. And it can be one of the trickiest questions on the IELTS exam, one of the most challenging, but with the right strategy, with the right techniques and knowing what you're doing, you can be successful on it. And that's exactly what I'm going to help you with today. As we look at this question, we're going to look on how we make sure we're completing the task correctly, that we're achieving the task that we're asked to do. We're going to be looking at using our keyword strategy for identifying the important information in both the questions and the passage. And then I'm going to throw in a few hints as we go along that are very specific to true, false, not given. If you've been doing practice, you may notice that there's also a set of questions that are called yes, no, not given. So these are actually very similar. The strategy for both is identical, but just let me tell you a little difference between the two types of questions. And today, as we look at true, false, not given, we're going to be looking for facts. True, false, and not given is identifying important facts in the passage based on the questions that were given. Yes, no, not given is more related to opinions and ideas. So when you're doing yes, no, not given types of questions, you're looking for opinions and ideas. But for today, we are looking for facts, and we're talking about true, false, not given, the strategy for this type of reading question. So whenever we begin a question of any type on the IELTS exam, the most important thing to do is to read the instructions and make sure we're aware of exactly what our task is. And I can tell you from experience, talking to lots of test takers and seeing how they do on the test, even though it seems like a simple thing, do not overlook the importance of reading the instructions and taking the time to underline them and to mark them and to make sure that you've read them. You don't want to get halfway through a set of questions and then be distracted by wondering if you're doing it the correct way. So let me tell you, first of all, when it comes to the reading section, and especially true, false, not given, your answers are not based on logic. They're not based on your experience, your opinion, or any prior knowledge that you may have on the topic. They are based completely on the passage. So if you look at this, is just one example of why it's so important to read the instructions, because if you read the instructions, this will be made clear to you. And the instructions are the following statements true, false, or not given according to the information in the passage? Not according to your knowledge, your opinion, or your experience. It's information in the passage. So let me just explain to you what it means for something to be true, what it means for something to be false, and for something to not be given. If a statement is true, you have to find in the passage something that shows very clearly that it's true, that it confirms the statement. The information in the passage confirms the statement as true. If something is false, you have to find specific information in the passage that contradicts the statement, that confirms that the statement is false. And then the third option, if you cannot find anything that confirms it as true, if you cannot find anything that confirms it as false, only then is it not given. Okay? So that's what's very important. It's based on information in the passage. You have to find, in order for it to be true, that it absolutely confirms it's true. False absolutely confirms that it's false. And if you don't find either of these confirmations, only then is it not given. Okay, so then we go on to using our keyword strategy. And I'm not going to go into detail in all the keywords here. In previous videos and other videos on my YouTube channel, you can find specific videos that go into detail on keywords. And at the end of this video, you'll see a link to a video with a specific keyword strategy. So first of all, when we underline the keywords, just remember we're always looking for proper names. We're always looking for dates. We're looking for technical terms or terms that we wouldn't see anywhere else, maybe words that are brand new for us. But one of the most important things in the reading section, and particularly in true, false, not given, are we want to be looking for comparative adjectives, superlatives. We want to be looking for possible words that could be synonyms. Synonyms play an important role in the reading strategy, and also be aware of paraphrasing. So let me just explain a little bit more about this. You might see a word in the question, but in the reading passage, it will be a different word. It will be a synonym. You may see a certain phrase in the questions, and then when you go to the reading passage, you'll be looking for a phrase that means the same thing, but it may be using synonyms or it may be structured in a different way. So you want to be prepared to identify synonyms and paraphrases. But I think the best clue for true, false, not given and the reading strategy is looking at adjectives, comparatives, and superlatives. And we'll see why that's so important as we go along. So if I were, I'm looking at my first set of questions now, and the reason that we start with the questions is by reading the questions and identifying keywords. We haven't looked at the passage yet, and we're not going to look at it until after we look at the questions. By the time we've dealt with the questions and underlined the key words, we could already have a very good idea about what the passage, the text, is going to be about. So that when we go to the text for the first time and we begin to read every word carefully, which is skimming, and going as fast as we can and marking key words, when we get to the passage for the very first time, because we've read the questions first, the passage will almost seem familiar to us. It won't seem like we're even looking at it for the first time because we'll already have some good information about what the passage is about. So here we have our first set of questions, and we can tell obviously that the topic of this passage is the Thames Tunnel, and we have some information about the Thames Tunnel here in the questions, and we're going to look at what are the most important keywords for giving us clues to finding the information we need in the passage. So the words that I've underlined are some of the keywords that I've just mentioned. In number one, the Thames Tunnel was the first tunnel. I'm going to underline first tunnel because first is a good adjective that gives us a clue. I'm not looking for information about the second tunnel or the last tunnel. I'm looking for information about the first tunnel. And then my second key is going to be built under a river. So that's that location, that information is very important information. I'm looking for a tunnel that was built under a river. Now, the second one, it's just a proper name, because anything that has capital letters is probably a good thing to underline. And I've underlined the eighth wonder of the world. And this one, the fact that they're stating here, the fact is the Thames Tunnel was the eighth wonder of the world. Okay, that's a very specific task, and you'll see why it's important to recognize that in just a few minutes. So number 2 says the Thames Tunnel was the eighth wonder of the world. And then number 3, we have people were drawn from all over to see the Thames Tunnel. The reason that I've underlined drawn from all over is because I think that that's a phrase that could quite easily be paraphrased, and that a synonym could be used, because it's a typical phrase, but it's a typical phrase that could possibly be said in a different way, a different paraphrase, using a synonym. So as you practice, you'll become more and more aware, as you practice these questions a few times, the type of things that are good clues. So you're looking for phrases that seem that they could be quite easily said in a different way. You're looking for proper names. You're looking for things that narrow down your options, like under a river. I'm not looking for a tunnel that went around the river. I'm looking for one that went under. And I'm looking for the first tunnel, not the second tunnel, the third tunnel. And then in the last question, number 4, the tunnel was used more. Okay, here's a comparative. So middle and upper classes, we know that we're looking for information. Did the middle and upper classes use the tunnel more than somebody else? Okay, it's a comparison. So now I know the type of information that I'm looking for. And I've underlined some key words. I've looked at the questions, and now it's time to go to the passage. And when I go to the passage, I'm going to skim. Skim means reading every word as quickly as possible, not for understanding, not for memorizing, not even to remember it. Okay? Each text in the reading section, you have to do 3 texts, and you have about 20 minutes to do each one. There's no point in trying to understand or memorize, because after 20 minutes, you won't care if you ever see that information again, right? The IELTS exam is not testing your knowledge. It's just testing your English ability, okay? And that's just an important thing to realize. After the 20 minutes is up and you've answered these questions successfully, you never have to think about the Thames Tunnel again, unless you want to. Okay, so now we go to the passage. And I've just taken a paragraph from the passage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly look and read every word, but only looking for key information. And as I go through every word as quickly as I can, I'm going to underline key words. So first of all, I'm going to underline any key words that I've already underlined in the questions. I'm going to underline any words that seem to be synonyms. I'm going to look for things that might be paraphrases of what I've seen in the questions. And on top of that, anytime I see dates or proper names, even if I haven't seen them in the first set of questions, I'm still going to underline those keywords, because I may need them for the second set of questions for this passage. So I take this passage, and as quickly as possible, I go through it, and I mark the words as carefully as possible. Now I understand that these paragraphs might be a little bit tiny right now, but as I go on a couple of slides, it'll get a little clearer and easier to see when we actually start comparing the questions and looking for the answers in the passage. So just bear with me on this slide. It will get clearer in a couple of slides. So as I go through this passage, I'm going in the first line. You'll notice I underlined under the River Thames. Remember, in the questions, in the first one I underlined under a river. So even now, I probably already have found the location for the answer to the first question. So I'm good, but I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to flip back and forth yet. I'm just my main task right now is to just get through the passage, skim it, the whole passage as quickly as possible, and underline the key information. I get to the second line and I see a word that I've never seen before in my life, subaqueous. Now, maybe some of you know what this means. I know what it means now because I've seen it before and looked it up, and I know what it means. But actually, what's more important there is the word subaqueous is not really going to help me answer a question at all. I haven't seen that word before. But what's most important is that adjective, first. First, if I took out the word subaqueous, it would just be first tunnel. And I remember in the questions, I did underline first tunnel. So now I know I'm really on the right track for finding the answers to my questions. And then I come and say, many people claimed it was the eighth wonder of the world. And I remember seeing eighth wonder of the world, and that many said that the Thames Tunnel was the eighth wonder of the world. So many people claimed it was the eighth wonder of the world. That's probably, it's just reaffirming for me I'm in the right place to find the answers I'm looking for. In the next line, I have 1843. I didn't have that date in the questions, but I always underline dates. Okay. And then I get to the next line and I see came from far and wide, came from far and wide. Now that sounds familiar. It sounds like something I underlined in the questions, but it's not the exact same words. It's probably a paraphrase. And I think it might be a paraphrase from drawn from all over. Do you remember that phrase in the questions? So now, I'm just becoming more and more sure that I'm in the right place to find the answers I'm looking for. And then I keep going and I come to the next line. And at the end of the last line, I start seeing something about different classes of people, all classes, the working class, middle classes, upper class, and why they use the tunnel. And I remember in question 4 that I looked at, I had underlined middle and upper classes. So in this case, before I go back to the questions and I keep going through the passage, I know where the information is for me to answer those questions. And now all I have to identify is whether they're true, false, or not given. Okay, so just to recap, the first thing we do is we read the instructions. Then we read the questions and we underline the key words. Once we've done that, we go to the passage and we skim the whole passage, marking the key words and finding the important information. Okay. And now we're ready to answer the question. So I have the passage above, and here's the first question that we're going to look at, okay? I hope it's not much better, but I hope it's a little better, and maybe you're adjusting to being able to see the information on the slide. But number one, the Thames Tunnel was the first tunnel ever built under a river. So what do you think? Is this true? Is this statement false? Remember, it's according to the passage. Is this true or false or not given? You can put your guess in the comments if you're watching this on Facebook. If you're watching it live, I'll just give you a second to do that, but just take a look. I'll give you a hint. Okay, it's in the first two lines of the passage. The Thames Tunnel was the first tunnel ever built under a river. So in the first line, we can see the Thames Tunnel was built under a river. So that part of the statement, we can confirm that. And in the second line, we see it was the first subaqueous tunnel. Now again, subaqueous isn't going to help us. That adjective is what helps us the most. It's the first tunnel. So if we put those two things that we underline together, it says the first tunnel built under a river. And that confirms that this answer is true. Okay? And that subaqueous, I'm just mentioning again, that wasn't really a clue, but what was on either side of it was the best clue, the adjective and the noun, first tunnel. Okay, so there we've got the answer to our first question. Let's look at our second question together. The Thames Tunnel was the eighth wonder of the world. So what do you think of this? Remember, in true, false, and not given, we're looking for facts, okay? Is this a true fact? The Thames Tunnel was the eighth wonder of the world. Is that true or false? Or is the information not in the passage? So let's take a look at our passage, and we see, we do find the eighth wonder of the world. And what does it say? What does the passage say about the eighth wonder of the world? We underlined it. It says many people claimed. Many people claimed it was the eighth wonder of the world. So there's our answer. So is this answer true or false? The difference might be small, but it's very important. Number two question says the Thames Tunnel was the eighth wonder of the world. Our passage says many people claimed. Claiming something is not the same as it being a fact, okay? If I tell you, if I claim, if I believe that the world is flat, it doesn't mean the world is flat, okay? So the Thames Tunnel was the eighth wonder of the world. The answer is false, okay? Because the passage doesn't say it was the eighth wonder of the world. It gives information to the contrary. It says many people claimed it was, okay? So just because many believed doesn't mean it was the eighth wonder of the world. So are you beginning to see? I hope you're beginning to see how true, false, not given works. So let's go on to question number 3. Whoops, I put the answer in there a little too quickly. Many people were drawn from all over to see the Thames Tunnel. And again, our clue for knowing that this is true is that paraphrase that we see in the fourth line. The fourth line says, came from far and wide, which is a paraphrase and synonymous with drawn from all over. And so we have information in the passage that confirms that number 3 is true. How are you doing so far? I hope that you're finding this helpful. You know, it does take a lot of different types of skills to answer questions of many different types in the IELTS exam. And I just want to let you know, if you haven't already, and I will put a link in the comments, I do have a free PDF. It's called 8 Essential Skills for the IELTS exam. So if you haven't gotten a copy of that free PDF yet, there will be a link in the comments, and I just encourage you to just become aware of the different types of skills that you need for the IELTS exam. And when it comes to the reading section, identifying information is probably the most important skill. And then you have other things, time management. If you can't find the answer to a question in the reading section, if it takes you more than 45 seconds, a minute at the most, to find the answer to a question, then it's time to move on. But when it comes to true, false, not given, I want to give you, they're not tricks, they're tips. But if you spend 45 seconds and you can't find any information that something is true or false, then that's where not given comes in, okay? If you can't find anything that confirms it's true, if you can't find anything that confirms it's false, then it's not given, okay? And so far, our first 3 questions have been true and false. So this leads me to maybe this is more of a trick, okay? We have 4 questions, and before we look at number 4, I want to tell you something about this question type. When you're answering true, false, not given, and the same is true for yes, no, not given. When you have a section about this, you will always have at least one of each answer. You will always have one true, at least one true. You will always have at least one false. And you will always have at least one not given. So as we've been going through these first 3 questions, and we know we only have one more. We know number 1 was true, number 2 was false, and number 3 is true. We haven't used not given yet. So there's a really good chance that the answer to number 4 is going to be not given. We do want to confirm that, though. You don't always want to be guessing, but that's just a little trick. If it comes down to it, and you have one question to go, maybe you're short on time and you want to keep going and get moving on to the next set of questions. If you haven't used not given, put it in. Or maybe you have 5 questions and you do 1 and 2 and you're sure of the answers, but you're not sure of number 3. So you can't find the answer, go to number 4 and you find out that that's true, and you find out the next one's false. And then you realize that number 3 is left empty. You couldn't find the answer, but you didn't use not given, or you didn't use true, or you didn't use false. That's when you can use that as a guess. So just remember, you're going to have at least one of each. You're going to have at least one of each answer. So that's just kind of a little trick, but it's probably a good thing to know. So let's take a look at number 4. The answer probably is not given, but we want to see why that is, okay? The tunnel was used more by middle and upper classes. Okay, so this passage tells us that the working class used it for functional use. We underlined that. And then it says the middle and upper classes used it more in tourism, as a tourist experience. So it tells us the reason that these different classes of people used the tunnel, but it does not tell us that the working class used it more than the middle class and upper class, or it doesn't tell us that the middle class or upper class used it more than the working class. So there's no comparison here. So the information that the tunnel was used more by the middle and upper classes is not in the passage. So now we know for sure that it's not given, because it doesn't say how much or compare how much the different classes used it. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the comments. And if you're watching on the replay, I will answer your questions no matter when you watch this video. Just place your questions in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them. So I hope that you found this helpful. I want to wish you all the best as you keep preparing for the IELTS exam. Don't hesitate to reach out, and don't hesitate to subscribe to this channel and see the link for my free PDF. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. All the best on your journey.